Now, we're going to take a look at ER diagrams in great depth. Please pay attention. There are a lot of different constructs here, and each construct has to be represented on your diagram differently. So, let's begin. We are going to use a great example of ER diagrams that comes from the Almasry text, Fundamentals of Database Systems. It's a fantastic textbook. I recommend you pick it up. In this model, we're looking at a typical company, and we want to model certain things about the company. And as you can see in this diagram, our rectangles are highlighted in yellow. Our rectangles are entity types. So we want to keep track of employees, departments, projects, and we also want to keep track of the employees' dependents. So those four things become the four entity types. And as discussed earlier, an entity is an instance of an entity type. So John Smith, he could be an employee. And product X, that could be a project. Now here we see attributes that are highlighted in yellow. These are the simple attributes of the employee entity type. And you can see they describe the entity type, they describe the employee. So we have the social security number of the employee, the birth date, we have the employee's address, their salary, and their sex. So we have simple attributes like social security number and sex, but now we're going to look at things that are not simple attributes. And the first we're going to look at is the name. If you notice in the green triangle, there is a name attribute. All employees have a name. But then there are these other attributes that are connected to the name attribute. First name, middle initial, last name. What's going on here is that we call this a composite attribute. The name attribute can be broken down into smaller pieces of useful information. So we could say, in essence, that the name attribute is composed of a first name, a middle initial, and a last name. And it might be better to store names that way, so I can have all the last names in their own field. Then I could do an alphabetic sort. The other kind of attribute you see is on the department entity type, and that is locations. Notice that this is in a double oval. The double oval says we have multiple values for that attribute. The clue to give it away was the fact that we called the attribute locations. It implies that a department could be someplace in New Jersey, and it could also have its headquarters in Pennsylvania. So one department could be in two different locations. Here you can see another attribute. It's the number of employees attribute, and it's in the purple box. If you look closely at this, you will see that the outline of that attribute, the outline of that oval, is not a solid line, but it is a dashed line. That dashed line means that the attribute is derived. A derived attribute can be calculated or figured out from either other attributes in the system or from relationships themselves. So in this particular case, the number of employees will be known some other way. And the way it's known is through the relationship. If I'm connecting employees to departments through the works for relationship, then I'm going to have a record of every department and every employee working in that department. And therefore, I can calculate the number of employees per department. So why have attributes that have a dashed oval on your chart? The reason is that, remember, the conceptual model is mostly used to talk to the business, to verify that you've heard what they want and you've accommodated their information requests. So if the business has said to you, it's very important that we keep track of the number of employees, you can put that on the diagram with a dashed oval. And you will tell your employer that, yes, I did hear you. We will cover the number of employees, and if you're wondering why it has a dashed oval, that means I'll be able to figure that information out from other information. Another good example of this is age. You might want to know the age of an employee, And the business partner might say, we really need to know ages. Fine. So then make age an attribute of the employee, make it a dashed oval. But you know, and I know, that we can derive that age of the employee from the date of birth attribute, which is already there. So putting attributes on your ER diagram that are derived is a comfort to the end user, and it also helps document the requirements. Now we know that in this case the number of employees and potentially their age are very important pieces of information for us to manage.